all the previews, but we've got Kamiar Mehrabian to come in from the Crimson and Cream Machine to talk a little bit about Oklahoma expansion, a little bit about their season. We normally do an SEC guide, but Kamiar, I believe that applies to you now. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I guess it does apply to us, and I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk a little bit about OU and maybe impending SEC football. Or I mean, the Big 12 says 2025, but I have an idea that that'll be much sooner than people are anticipating, especially like everybody else in the Big 12.
What do you know? How do you know? How do you know how this went down? What went down between the Oklahoma and the SEC and Texas and all that going on? When did it get started?
So, for a long time, Oklahoma had David Bourne as their president. And David Bourne was a big Big Ten guy. He was all about AAU and academics. And if conference realignment were to happen under Bourne, OU and Texas, or at least OU, would likely be going to the Big Ten. Well, they got a new president, and he's more of an athletics money guy, and the SEC kind of fits that bill. And so, you know, the rumor was this: it was that Oklahoma and Texas, their third tier media rights were ending relatively soon in the next year or two. And rumors suggested that said, hey, if they re up with the Big 12, of course they're going to be in the Big 12, but most likely they want to earn more money and you'll be able to find them um, maybe basically parking their third tier rights somewhere else. And that would give you a really big indicator about where they would be. Now, fast forward however many months, and it turns out that Texas and OU had been discussing going to the SEC as early as January, right after bowl season, and that's where pretty much where we get from there. And it's again, I guess A&M, they kind of got pantsed in front of the entire country, where the SEC commissioners talking to this about every other SEC AD and president except A&M, and so that's fantastic stuff. But yeah, here we are, and it looks like OU and Texas to the SEC a lot sooner than we think.
Yeah, and how do you imagine they were able to keep this under wraps for 6 months?
That's a good question, and of course, it had to have been an agreement with Texas regarding Sankey, because there's no other way, because there's a lot of bad blood, of course, between A&M and Texas. They hate each other. They're big rivals. And of course, A&M made that gentleman's agreement that's like, hey, you can't invite Texas to the SEC because you're going to crush a lot of A&M's recruiting prowess, which is likely why they're very upset, because that was really the only card they had to play over OU and Texas, which is, hey, you want to stay in Texas, you want to play the SEC, go play A&M. And so I if A&M were to get out way out ahead of this in January, the story might have been a little bit different. But as soon as A&M found out, it sounds like they tried to torpedo it and it backfired and everything went much faster than anticipated. And yeah, I have no idea how they kept it under wraps for 6 months. But my goodness, what an embarrassing kind of way to find out that you were the only one out of the entire SEC conference that was left out of the conversations.
I don't know how many, if they were actually left out, or how much of that is actually saber rattling to their fan base.
Hmm.
But one thing that I am curious about with Oklahoma and Texas coming in, what are the games that you're looking forward to playing that aren't the marquee games? What are the trips you're looking forward to making?
Oh man, we're already excited to go to the Grove. We're very excited to go visit down to Mississippi. Not, of course, not at Mississippi State. Not looking forward to those games. But yeah, we're really, of course, like being OU, the biggest games that you would play are OU Texas, and you don't even get to go to Austin for that game. You go to the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, and that's it.
Hmm.
I mean, Stillwater, Bedlam. That's a cool rivalry game, but OU owns that rivalry. And are you excited to go anywhere else? Iowa State, TCU, and Fort Worth? Not really. And so you look at the SEC. You can get to go to Baton Rouge, you get to go to Tuscaloosa, you get to go. to the Grove. You get to go to a lot of different Gainesville, where it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Gainesville, but you get to go to a lot of different places, and I'm just excited for a lot of those matchups, and even in Tennessee, where Oklahoma's former national title winning quarterback's now the head coach over at Tennessee, and Josh Heupel. So I'm excited to see marquee matchups nearly every week, or like a legitimate opponent every week, and going and seeing a lot more pageantry, because people want to say OU and Texas held up the Big 12, like propped it up as a legit conference, and that's the furthest from the truth you can get. I mean, they want to say OU and Texas have 17 combined Big 12 titles. Well, OU has 14 of those 17. So OU is carrying the entire conference on its back. And so I know people that are Oklahoma fans from the Oklahoma side, they were ecstatic once this news got out, because it means you get to go play legit teams. You get to go play LSU, A&M, Arkansas, that always likes to chirp at OU. You get to go play Missouri once again, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia. There's just a ton of teams out in the SEC that you want to be a part of. And it's not only just a moneymaker, but my goodness, the amount of eyes on television screens.
Yeah, and with you guys will eventually play Tennessee, and one thing that we make fun is how often they play Rocky Top, just repeatedly. Now you guys are a little bit known for the same thing as that. So, how many times combined do you think that song will be played during a game if y'all played each other?
Oh man, I have no idea. I actually, in a podcast not that long ago with my buddy, we talked about over and under how many times Boomer Sooner was going to be played this year, and we put the over and under about 200.5, and we were not that sure either way. We were like, it's definitely not the under. It's going to be pretty close to being over or an even. They play the heck out of Boomer Sooner. Like, if you're down 21, play Boomer Sooner. If you're up 21, play Boomer Sooner. And there's not really that many other songs they do play. I mean, that's all they do. And so I have no idea how many times, if when OU plays Tennessee, heck, those matchups in Knoxville and Norman, how many times we heard Rocky Top and how many times they heard Boomer Sooner. It's a lot, and I imagine both fan bases got really annoyed, and they weren't even playing each other every year.
Who do you think is going to emerge as your like second or third tier rival that actually means something? Geography, is it Arkansas? Is it Missouri?
Oh man, Missouri technically was already a rival of OU, even though nobody ever viewed it that way. People always have viewed A&M and Missouri as middle of the road programs, because that's what they always were in the Big 12, and I think that's what A&M fans are kind of scared about, with OU and Texas coming back to the SEC and drawing up some of the recruiting grounds. But I could see easily Arkansas being a team that slots into that. Hey, we talk trash every year. Our colors are mildly the same. You're right next door into Tulsa and Fayetteville. That could be a really good one. I could see OU striking something up with LSU, because they're both kind of in that corridor, that western kind of corridor of what the new SEC would look like. So I could see both of those programs being kind of like new rivals, I suppose.
It's weird that you guys have only played Arkansas like 12 or 13 times. Is there any particular reason for that?
Man, I imagine it has something to do with the old Big 8 and the Southwest Conference, and how Arkansas is a part of the Southwest Conference, and they jetted for the SEC, and that's when the Big 12 was created. And so, I mean, I think the last time both these teams played was in the Cotton Bowl in 2001, and that game ended like 7-3 or 10-3. It was an ugly winter game. I have no idea why they haven't played that much, considering how much the fan bases just don't like each other. That's a good question.
Yeah. I was just looking at the standings and that, and I know that they were a big rival of Texas also, so maybe Arkansas didn't want to be a big rival of both of them, or maybe it was just their plate was full at the time. But if somebody dropped you in at the Red River Shootout in 1985, Barry Switzer's on the sideline, Darrell Roy is on the sideline, and they told you that 3 teams from the Southwest Conference right now are going to be in the SEC and 25% of the Big 8, what would you say?
I'd say they're probably pretty crazy about it, but here we are. It's just so wild. And I kind of feel bad about the rest of the Big 12, like teams like Kansas State. In Baylor, I have no idea where those dudes are going to land, and I'm kind of worried that teams like Kansas State, they're going to land in a group of five. I don't know if the Pac-12 wants them. I don't know if the ACC wants them. Baylor has their own social issues that they're going to find out pretty soon. Even TCU. So I'm a little bit worried about those guys, but it is what it is. But yeah, it's pretty wild how this
Yeah.
all came together pretty rapidly.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Also, before I let you get out of here today, do you have any idea how many numbers of teams in the Big 12 that the conference just dissolves? What's the magic number?
That's a great question. And that's something that has been on the ongoing discussion as far as what happens with the Big 12. Do they try to expand and just add four teams till 2025 and then go join new conferences? What is that magic number to where they dissolve, or what is that magic number to where they stay intact for a few more years until they find their different ways? And there's a paper trail that suggests the Big 12 fiscally just cannot survive without Texas and OU. And I would surmise that there's no Big 12 this time next year, most likely. OSU wants to pack their bags and go to the ACC. You've got Kansas and Iowa State likely headed to the Big 10, and Texas Tech wants to go to the Pac-12. And so I don't think they're going to survive regardless of how many numbers are in the conference, just because they don't have the monetary pull that Texas, number one in the country, does with fiscally concerned. OU, number 8 in the country as far as money coming in. None of the other teams in the conference generate that much cash, and that's just the way it's going to be.
Well, real quick before we let you get out of here again, I'm sorry about this. What's the preview? What's the prognostication for Oklahoma this year? I know they're in the Big 12, but how do they look? Matt Corral at Ole Miss and Spencer Rattler is essentially the same quarterback, so they're probably pretty set there, which they always are. But how do they look?
The goal this year, in comparison to previous years, people at Oklahoma always like to say, "Oh, if you don't win a national title, it's a fluke of a season," regardless how kind of not realistic that is. But this year is a legit year in which people are saying, "Hey, Oklahoma's defense has gotten much better under Alex Grinch over the last 3 years. They improved markedly each year. He's going into his third year. I think they were with Mike Stoops. They were like 119th in the country. Awful defense. Alex Grinch comes in immediately. They're a top 60 defense with the same players. The year after, they're a top 30 defense with those same players, getting those body types back into the system. And the offense has always been the offense under Lincoln Riley. It's going to be one of the top 5 offenses in the country. And they're returning about 22 guys with starting experience. A lot of people are saying and expecting Oklahoma needs to be in that national title game this year because of how well they came together last year, how good the defense is becoming, and how efficient the offense always will be under Lincoln Riley. So people are expecting to make it to the national title game. I don't know if people are expecting them to win it this year, but I know people do expect them to make the college football playoff and win that first game.
All right, man. We appreciate it. And as this gets closer, we need to do this again.
Yeah, for sure, man. And of course, we'll probably do previewing game days as soon as maybe as early next year.
Yeah, seriously, man. Thank you very much. And good to talk to you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on.